Hello, and thank you for joining us for Snow Software's webinar, What's Next for ITAM, Navigating the New Normal. Let me kick off the session by introducing our panel. My name is Becky Trevino, and I serve as Vice President of Product Marketing at Snow Software, and I'm today's moderator. Let me start off by introducing Julia Collingburn. Julia, would you give us a quick description of your role at Snow and just your experience in ITAM?
Sure. I'm a principal business consultant at Snow Software, been there for 5 years, and I'm an experienced ITAM professional.
All right, Kelly?
Hi, my name is Kelly and I'm a senior licensing consultant here at Snow and a Microsoft licensing expert, and I've been in the world of software asset management for about 9 years.
Fabulous. So you guys just heard Julia and Kelly's experience. I work with them on a daily basis and they're fabulous. I hope that the next 20 plus minutes that you spend with us, you get to get a lot of learnings out of your time with Julia and Kelly. From that, let's switch over to what we plan to share with you today. Here's a description of our agenda. We'll cover 5 points: ITAM and crisis modes, kind of what ITAM's role was in enabling all remote teams, the top challenges you're facing today as you kind of put these all remote teams in place and you're trying to do your job as usual while going through a global pandemic. And also what's next for you, what's next for IT asset management as we just enter the next stages of this new normal, as well as a summary of our webinar. The last few weeks and the months to come will be a tremendous amount of change and uncertainty for all of us, both at our home life as well as our professional life. As we walk through the impact on IT asset management and software asset management professionals in this webinar, we'll walk the audience through 3 strategic ways of change that we've put in. That's enabling all remote teams, we just described in terms of kind of what the experience was, what's the best practice. I kind of described this as what was the support IT asset management professionals provided the organization. From there, we'll go into this established visibility. This is where we believe most people are today, where they have these remote teams in place. Everyone has a laptop, everyone has a monitor, they're somewhere in the world working in response to these shelter-in-place, stay-at-home orders. But now you have people within the organization asking you for insights. Tell me about usage, tell me about spend. So we're gonna walk you through some of the problems there, and then drive optimization, which is what we believe is gonna be the next stage of ITAM and crisis mode. This is where you're going to have to help the organization build resilience so that they can come out of here a more stronger organization. And this is where we see the role of ITAM, which is support, insights, resilience as you work to driving these business outcomes. From there, let's start off with the first topic, enabling all remote teams. So government-ordered stay-at-home and lockdown orders due to COVID-19 have massively impacted the way we work and do business. Julia, you spend a significant amount of time working with IT asset managers, and you're also an ITAM professional. Give us more insight into the unique role IT asset managers have played in helping organizations successfully pivot to all remote workforces.
Sure. Now, speaking to customers over the last few weeks, they've all been heavily involved in enabling their organisations to operate successfully from home. And this has really varied from those organisations who were previously mainly office-based, because they've had to procure, build and deploy hundreds of laptops and mobile phones, which has been a huge challenge for them. To others who've had employees come into the office to collect their office computer and external monitors to take home, as in their role a laptop wouldn't suffice. It's been a huge logistical challenge for many, an enormous task to keep track of who has what and where is it.
So I'm going to follow on from Julia and just have a little chat about some of the issues that software asset managers have been facing at this time. And I think one of those key issues that people have been facing is having to make quick decisions and get quick access to remote technologies. I believe that the focus has been around enabling organizations to keep functioning, and that has been obviously put forward before any SAM policies to get the business up and running again. What we're seeing now is that businesses are moving to that point where they are up and running and now looking to find out what they do next. One of the problems that we are facing is that there's been a huge amount of software that's been desperately required in this time. And in the rush to get this sorted, people have deployed software, perhaps not really knowing where that software is, and the visibility has been lacking for these people, as well as sourcing the laptops, as Julia just mentioned, but not considering perhaps software that is pre-installed on those laptops. These are obviously not thoughts that people have been having at this time, but this is where people are starting to focus their efforts on now.
Thank you, Kelly. Julia, it does seem like we are, to your point, Kelly, kind of entering this next stage where people have worked really hard to abide by these orders and get people, as you said, just working, keep the organization running. It was putting these business continuity plans in place and just going. And as Julia mentioned, for some organizations, this was potentially easier because they kind of had everybody on laptops. They were distributed, working remotely, using Zoom. And for others, this is completely new territory where they primarily worked in the office and actually had to deploy. I remember reading a story out of Italy where a good number of clients for an IT consulting firm have just been like, nobody ever works from home. They had to figure out the basics. They said like laptops, monitors, et cetera. So this wasn't available. So yes, this is massive. And as you mentioned, Kelly, it's like you just go source, and then we enter what I'm going to say is the next stage, which is solving today's challenge. And the first one of that being tracking remote usage, which is you went out there, you put all of these things in place, and now you're at a stage where you're trying to figure out what you deployed from that end. Julia, you mentioned all this hardware that goes in. Kind of give us some insights into what IT asset management professionals are looking at as they're looking to track remote asset usage.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we were just saying, in the initial phase, it was just getting equipment out the door as quickly as possible to make sure people can continue working. So the next challenge for the ITAM professionals is that visibility, really getting to grips with what asset has gone where and who's using it and in what form. So we've covered, we've got laptops we know have gone out there. It could be the actual office machine computer that's gone home, or it could actually be that people are using their own equipment at home and accessing the network remotely. So it's a real challenge to understand where and how and who is using what. So, and then the next question after initially assessing, it's how do you know when you've captured everything? How do you know if you're missing something? At what point do you have that comfort and that satisfaction that you are capturing everything that's in scope, the entire estate, whether that's remote, and as I said, whether it's actual corporate machines or remote? And if someone's remotely accessing the corporate network, can you keep track of all the devices that are coming in remotely? So it's a massive challenge, but all key insights that they can provide to the business.
I think that's huge, right? Where, as Kelly mentioned, you were trying to just get the business running. Now we're entering, this different stage of establishing visibility where you've created this massive all remote workforce. Now you have to think about managing it and the implications of what you've just built out that you just had to do quickly and didn't develop a process, didn't have time to think about it. You just had to go. So from that, the next one that Kelly mentioned, you just bought what you needed. And let's go in and talk about unbudgeted cloud and SaaS spend, because from this end, there was nobody forecasting when people were building business plans at the end of the year, what exactly was that, hey, I'm going to buy a bunch of Zoom, I'm going to buy a bunch of cloud. As I heard stories, for instance, Azure's data center in the UK just went to full capacity. So from this end, Kelly, could you just give us some more information on just what you're seeing customers and just folks, SAM professionals within the industry dealing with it as they're looking at unbudgeted cloud and SaaS spend?
Sure, yeah. So it's one of the main things that you just mentioned is obviously video conferencing software. Any software like that has obviously been in great demand at the moment. The main reason why cloud products in general are so popular is because they're cheap, they're easy to deploy, easy to procure. And in the current times, it's been very simple, essentially, for people to deploy this software in their environment because that need was great and the need was significant to the business to keep running. However, one of the things that people often don't really think about is actually how easy it is to overspend when we look at cloud products. We often in the world of SAM have thought about compliance, but actually in the world of cloud, overspending is a real issue day to day. And in this situation, it's a very real risk, and it's definitely something to be considered at the moment. One of the things to bear in mind is you'll never own a cloud license. So the cost for a growing business, for your total of cloud licensing cost, that cost is always going to go up in almost all cases because your business is growing. So you're always going to be paying that monthly fee, that annual fee, and it's never going to end. So the other thing that is important to consider is changes to software rules down the line. The rules that you have in place at the moment, maybe you actually took the time to actually read the terms and conditions. If you did, well done. But those rules can actually change with cloud products. The rules don't stay the same. They can, the vendors can implement changes down the line which could impact you financially. And then there's obviously the consideration around employees that have been furloughed, and what do you do with their cloud licenses? Do you allow them to be reharvested? Can you do that? That obviously will depend on the software and the vendor. And then obviously we have to consider a lot of the trial software that's out there at the moment. Always the trial comes to an end at some point. So these are some of the challenges we're seeing with cloud spend at the moment.
I'd agree with those. I think that that's something that people, because of that ease and just pricing flexibility, that just we see cloud and SaaS and just, which was already growing, just skyrocketing even more. From this, then let's go into our last section that we saved as the top 3 challenges IT asset management and software asset management professionals are facing today. It's monitoring risk and compliance. Now, I could argue these 3 portions are of risk and of a challenge for everyone within the IT organization. But kind of from your end, Julie, let's go with you. Do you see monitoring risk and compliance? Could you provide us that IT asset management perspective? What's something that they should be looking at?
Absolutely. Laptops, you may or may not know, can be a weak link into an organization's network. So if you think, as we've said, so many employees now are using laptops and remote working, there's so many possibilities for security to be compromised. So considerations at the moment from an asset perspective is, do these assets have up-to-date antivirus software? Do they have software on them that's end of support or end of life? They're no longer having security fixes and patches. Do all laptops have VPN software, so virtual private network? And also considerations around the licensing and the risk around there, whether you're sufficiently licensed. So I think Kelly would pick up more on that side, but from a hardware perspective, yeah, it's the security vulnerability side that is paramount at the moment.
So from the software side of things, I think one of the things that is often, again, overlooked day to day is access to remote applications. However, at the moment, this is something that is obviously hugely on the increase with everybody working from home. There are many compliance risks associated with this. Obviously, they vary depending on the application and the vendor. But examples of this are, if you've got a remote application being accessed from a server, and you haven't restricted the access on this, so theoretically, anyone in your organization could access that application, then what's your liability on that? Well, in most cases, certainly in many cases for Microsoft, if you can't prove or demonstrate that usage has been restricted to specific employees, then you would be liable to cover all of your employees with a license for the potential usage. So this potential usage situation is something that comes up a lot when we look at remote applications, and it's definitely one of the most significant compliance risks to be thinking about at this time, especially now when you have people who are accessing far more things than they would have done previously being in the office.
Thank you both. From this end, as we spoke about, we see this as falling under visibility. We see it's critical for ITAM and SAM professionals to be providing visibility as they're in this next stage of crisis, where you've worked in establishing all remote teams, now it's providing the visibility to manage in that environment. Before going on to managing what's next, I wanted to pause, Julia, because we ended the last slide discussing the importance of monitoring risk, particularly from a security perspective. Tell me about the unique role that IT asset management should play in working with security teams, especially in this environment.
Sure. Yeah, the ITAM professional should have, as we've been discussing at this point, full visibility of all hardware and software assets. So they're the person that knows who has what and where, how often it's used and when it was last used. So that's really key insights. And on top of this, they can also provide insight into the type of software that's being used on these assets, or which assets are missing particular software from a security perspective. As we mentioned before, you know, the end of life, end of support software, antivirus software perhaps missing. This is all key data that can be fed into the security team so they have full visibility and they can then assess the risk.
I'd say for our viewers today, we're going to pause and say that this is a best practice. From our customers, the ones that we see really thriving in this field, they have developed this relationship within their security teams, and they're looking at this data as valuable, as a goldmine of information to help them manage risk. And one of the components of all security frameworks, in fact, all is the foundation of ITAM, is being able to see that data. So for this one, just take this one, jot it down as a best practice if you're not doing this today, figuring out how to move forward with it, because this is essentially important all of the time, but particularly now that we're in an environment with all this remote usage, everything going on, and just a bunch of chaos. Bringing that certainty of being able to provide visibility into what people are using will be tremendously important to your organization and will be great for your career. We're going to move on to managing what's next. You know, we're still going through this big aftermath of this transition, all remote teams, we're providing visibility, but more and more we're starting to think about what's going to happen when we reopen business? How are we going to deal with the economic fallout from this massive disruption in the way that we've operated? In this stage, let's hear from Julia and Kelly about just efforts around optimization, what we're looking at to build resilience within the organization, help your company be something, to be someone that actually comes out on top from this. Julia, let's start off the conversation by talking about right-sizing IT spend.
Sure. So with now more than at any other time, it's key to only be spending what you need in order for your business to succeed. So you want to be looking at unused software. Have you got any unused software in a bundle? Look at whether it'd be more cost effective to have an individual license rather than be buying a bundle of products. Streamline your software store so you're not managing and supporting multiple applications that have the same function. And with these insights that you've got on usage, look at right-sizing your software agreements too. It's really key just to be streamlining and focusing on what really matters. And to do this, it's also worth taking the time to baseline initially. So look and ensure you have all your costs in the system so you can prioritize accordingly. And then also be able to report back return on investment to the business so they can see what savings have been made. So rather than numbers, they actually have costs and value against them. And as Becky mentioned in the previous slide, it's a real opportunity for ITAM professionals to raise their profile within their organizations and be seen as facilitators and, you know, a person to turn to for key information and insight on the business.
Thank you, Julia. Kelly, I'm going to go over and talk to you about managing clouding usage. You spoke about unbudgeted. Now it's, hey, I bought it, regardless of whether it was budgeted or not. How do I go about managing it?
So again, I think the key thing here is to echo the visibility statement that we've been saying. Visibility of your cloud and SaaS usage is extremely important at the moment. You want to be monitoring what your cloud usage really is, looking at those peak numbers. And I think really that's when you can start to move on to the stage of thinking, do we have our users on the right plan? Is it possible to lower plans for certain users, which may be more affordable, or perhaps even ditch another piece of software that you're using and increase the plan that you're on to give you that additional software that you need? These are the things that people need to be really thinking about and looking at, and it all starts with visibility. Again, things like Azure servers, they can be spun up so easily, and I imagine many Azure servers have probably been spun up over the last few weeks. And often what happens is you spin up a server and you don't really think about it ever again. Sometimes it's used, sometimes it isn't. These are things that need to be thought about, considered, looked at, and monitored, because you don't want to be paying for more than what you're using. And that's really the key for cloud products. It's very easy to get sucked into this world of just small numbers. This is my small £10 a month figure per user. But when you look at that overall cost that you're paying indefinitely moving forward, that number is significantly larger than that £10 a month for that user. When you add up all those users and you multiply that by however many months, which could be infinite. So this is why it's such a key thing to really think about. And I think I just add into that is now is the time to familiarize yourself with your agreement terms. Many people don't know the rules around your cloud environment and your SaaS environment. By familiarizing yourself with those terms, you can understand firstly whether you're inadvertently breaking those rules, but also how far you can actually push those rules. Can you, are you able to license this one way and actually save yourself money within those terms and conditions that you've got? These are the things you need to start thinking about and looking at now, so that you're able to formulate that plan to move forward.
I'm going to pause and say here, last year I attended a Gartner conference, and one of the analysts threw out a stat. It was about 28% of their users stated cloud as the number one reason why they purchased a software asset management platform. With this pandemic right now, I'm going to venture to say that number is going to quickly double this year, because this cloud and SaaS, some people always associate cloud and SaaS with just being cheap. But the reality, what you just mentioned, Kelly, is so true. Once you take that figure and then multiply it by usage, this is a consumption model. It's not a negotiation problem. It's totally different. And a lot of people tend to either disregard it because it doesn't have that big contract, et cetera. But it's one of those, that flexibility also brings tremendous cost. And you have to spend the time educating yourself. And if you're not currently managing SaaS and cloud, you really have to take this opportunity to make the business case as to why you deserve a seat at the table as an ITAM and SAM professional, in terms of being able to monitor that usage and then manage it, so that we can actually bring tremendous savings. Because you need to have that view between just your traditional enterprise applications as well as your cloud and your SaaS to really be able to right-size IT spend effectively. From that end, I'm going to switch back to you, Kelly, because your background as a Microsoft licensing expert and former auditor, while everything's going on, it's still business as usual for professionals. The renewals are still going to come up. There's still audits, but you're kind of operating in this weird world. Can I tell us how people should be thinking about these renewals at this time?
Yes, so renewals definitely won't stop. They're going to continue, as far as I'm aware, as normal. And this is something that's going to be very difficult for people to manage, especially if they haven't got any plans in place on how to do that. I think it's really important to start preparing for any upcoming renewals earlier than you would normally. And you really need to start that by getting that visibility. That's where every renewal starts from. Every renewal process. I think you need to be thinking about those documents that you have, all those contracts, those agreements, the terms and conditions you have, to really understand what your commitments are, understand where you can decrease commitments if you need to, and think about true ups, true downs, all of those scenarios. But I think auditing is an interesting subject at the moment because, I mean, legally, if your vendor is legally entitled to audit you, they could still audit you right now. I would suggest that that is unlikely at this exact moment because I think they probably wouldn't want to be seen to be auditing people. I could be wrong. They could still do it. Legally, they can do it. But audits will happen. Audits, reviews, whatever you want to call them, these vendors will want to check what software you have been using during this time. They are probably very aware that there will be many organizations that have suddenly needed to use a lot more of their software than they have been. And they're going to be aware of that. So I expect in the coming months that these audit scenarios will start creeping back up on us. And I think, how do you prepare for an audit? Well, the first thing, step one really is, is that visibility. It's visibility, it's having a plan and having that communication and that plan in place. What do you do if you are audited? And that really stems from knowing what you have, what's installed, what is being used, what cloud plans are your users on? Are they using those to their maximum benefit? Can you lower these plans? These are all things that you need to be thinking about. Both of the renewal and the audit scenarios go hand in hand, because if you're doing all these things and you're preparing, then it won't matter whether it's a renewal you've got coming up or an audit. They're pretty much planned for in the same way, using those same techniques of monitoring and that awareness that you need of your environment.
Thank you. See you, Kelly. I'm going to summarize the slide with saying optimization. If you're thinking about where you are today, it's established visibility. If you're thinking about what's coming up next, it's helping the organization build that resilience. And one of the mechanisms you do that is optimization. It's helping them look at their overall IT spend to get the big picture. Where are the big buckets of spend? What can we decrease? Getting a hold of cloud and SaaS. I can't reiterate how important that is, because a lot of organizations either are saying that's not my responsibility, it doesn't fall to me. I think as more CIOs recognize just the risk of this spend, it's important to get ahead of it. And then just business as usual, preparing for that next renewal, that audit scenario. Just know it's going to happen, it's going to come up, and just get ahead of it. I'm going to go to Kelly in our next slide to say, you mentioned earlier about SaaS and free stuff and just putting an awareness around that. When we were kicking off the prep for this webinar, you highlighted this as something that was just a risk area. It just sounded alarms for you. Give us some insight as to why this kind of concept, all these free trial offers, all this stuff going on, as well as other things going. Just kind of give us something of why this makes you nervous.
Yeah. So firstly, trial software is exactly what it says. It's a trial. At some point, that trial will end, and that doesn't always mean that the software is suddenly unusable. Quite often, that software can continue to be used. The dangers of that is obviously that you end up using unlicensed software. But I think the real danger here, with whether it's free stuff, which we all love, and trial software, any situation where you're given these really tempting offers, it's much like any company trying to sell you anything. It's to rope you in. It's to make you want it. And then once you've got that piece of software, it's very easy, especially if it's good software, it's very easy to become reliant on that software. And once you get so far down the line of distributing that software within your organization, and suddenly you've got half of your staff using that one piece of software that may have been a trial, it may have been given free or very, very cheaply, then they can put the price up, or you can find that there's an issue where using that piece of software alongside another piece of software may cost you more money, or you need to get a higher version of the license, or various things can happen which essentially mean that software is going to cost you more. And obviously in the situation at the moment, people won't necessarily be thinking about their long-term plans with a specific piece of software. But the normal process that you might go through to establish whether that software is right for your organization, all of that will, I imagine, have gone out the window for many organizations. And I can understand why, because the times are call for software to be procured very quickly without that initial analysis. However, if you get so far down the line with that piece of software, your organization will become reliant on it, and then you start to have to think about the sheer IT costs alone of just uninstalling and getting a new product. If you decide you no longer want to keep that particular application, you want to change it for something else, that then becomes an entire process that costs a lot of time, a lot of money. Otherwise, if you don't want to go through that process, you end up having to pay the increased costs, or actually having to pay for the full license of the trial software that you're now reliant on, etc. So these are all things that come about as risks with these cheap, free, and trial pieces of software.
Thank you, Kelly. I think it's just important for everybody to understand there's always a cost to free. If this is a software you need, whoa, take advantage of it. But definitely use your systems to keep tabs on what these offers are, because one may be okay, but multiple just may present a huge problem to you in the future, especially since a lot of what we're procuring right now was just unbudgeted last year. And key takeaways, I'm going to quickly run through as we close on this webinar of the 5 things we really want you thinking about. Visibility is job number 1 right now. You probably heard that term just on and on throughout this session. Just ensure you're providing visibility. As Julie referenced, this is an opportunity for you to raise your profile within your organization, but also just to be of help. This is incredibly important for all departments, to security, to the CFO, to the CIO. This is really an opportunity to stand out. Also, number 2 is get ahead of the cost savings request. It's coming. Again, it's just a great opportunity to raise your profile and to be seen as somebody who just has valuable information, is know it's coming and just be prepared to provide the visibility as well as the suggestion of, okay, based on usage, how do we rationalize these various applications? What's best to cut? What's best to keep? What's best to uptake? Don't be fooled by cloud and SaaS. You got to get a hold of it. It's not cheap when bought in quantities. In fact, it's just significantly more complicated because there's no shelfware in SaaS. You pay for what you use. Aligning ITAM and security, extremely important. You are a key component to that strategy, and definitely go after your seat at the table there. And something Kelly mentioned I thought was fantastic is expect audits when this ends. Organizations they're going to be looking at, perhaps they're postponing, perhaps something else is changing in their environment. So just expect it. And something I like that Kelly said as our prep work during this was just operate as if you were in the early stages of an audit. Just think through it. So I want to thank you all for attending. As we close, if you're a Snow customer, we want to have a special ask to you. We're currently building these guides as to how you can actually use the Snow platform to get in this visibility and optimization. An example of such is one that Kelly and Julie are building, which is visibility, managing furloughed employees with the Snow platform. That's going to give you this guide through it. If you have suggestions, because we're kind of using our brains to think about which ones are the right next ones to build, please go to our community and post this as a suggested topic. We're going to be out there looking for it. So please definitely go. This is definitely for, call it the Snow customers, since this will tell you exactly how to use our platform, and you do need to have our platform's capability in order to take advantage of these guides. For those who aren't, maybe it's a good one to check out just so that you know some topics that we think are relevant and important. Next call to action from our end is to visit the resource center at snowsoftware.com. There's a really good guide there, cost optimization for IT leaders, that we think would be really great for many of you to download to really get ahead of that optimization stage. Provides a really strong overview of that. And I want to thank you for your time, audience, as well as Julie and Kelly. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge from that end, and have a good rest of your day.